our brain-first period intrigued many scientists. The idea of brain tissue fossilizing over such an extensive period would have been extremely rare, so it's kind of like a miracle. As the news circulated, the scientific community grew increasingly doubtful about the identification. Questions arose about how soft and perishable brain tissue could survive millions of years. Some scientists proposed alternative explanations, suggesting that the specimens might have been misidentified elephant brains, or plant matter with resemblance to brain. Chi Eng Gu, a Malaysian researcher, gained attention for his unconventional claims in paleontology. He asserts that he has identified numerous baby dinosaurs by interpreting rocks with shapes that resemble juvenile reptiles. Gu refers to his unique approach as petrified embryology, a self-proclaimed new field in paleontological study. However, Gu's claims have not gained widespread acceptance within the scientific community. Many paleontologists are skeptical of his methodology and findings, as they often lack scientific evidence or consensus to support his interpretation. The interpretation of rock formations as representing embryonic or juvenile dinosaurs requires substantial and verifiable evidence, which Gu's work has yet to provide. So yeah, that's basically about the entry. I didn't really find too much on this topic on the internet, besides like a blog from Chi Eng Gu explaining how he's still trying to get evidence and stuff for his theory. Pangenesis gemulus. Pangenesis was a theory proposed by Charles Darwin to explain the process of heredity before the discovery of genes. Darwin recognized the importance of environmental factors and random variations in the evolutionary process, but he lacked a clear understanding of how traits were physically transmitted from parents to offspring. In an attempt to bridge this gap, he formulated the provisional concept of pangenesis. Darwin postulated that the body cells share gemmules, or living atoms containing heredity information that circulate throughout an organism's body and eventually gathered in the reproductive organ. These gemmules were then believed to be passed down to the next generation, determining the traits of the offspring. Despite Darwin's efforts, pangenesis faced skepticism even among his contemporaries. Darwin himself had doubts about the theory, and it was never fully embraced by supporters of the scientific community. Cometary Earth Theory. William Wisdom's new theory of Earth proposed a unique explanation for major historical events, aligning them with literary interpretations of the Bible. In 1696, Wisdom suggested that comets were the primary cause beyond catastrophic occurrences in Earth's history. His theory attributes significant events such as the fall of man described in Genesis to specific comet impacts. According to Wisdom, a comet striking the Earth initiated the rotational motion mentioned in the biblical narrative of humanity's descent. He further linked cometary impacts to the biblical story of Noah's flood and other historical events like the plague of Egypt. Remarkably, he even associated everyday weather events such as rain with the influence of comets. Despite his elaborate connections between comets and historical events, Wisdom's ideas were considered heretical during his time. His contemporaries, including the renowned scientist Isaac Newton, did not fully embrace his theory. Wisdom's work foreshadowed concepts that would emerge in later centuries, like the Shiva hypothesis, the Nemesis and Nibiru theories, and the works of Immanuel Milankovsky. Aquatic pterosaurs. In 1784, Cosimo Alessandro Carini reconstructed pterosaur fossils and suggested that these creatures were aquatic, envisioning them as animals that swam using their wings as paddles. This idea persisted until around 1830. During this time, Johann Georg Wagner proposed a theory that grouped pterosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and plesiosaurs together as ancestral monarchy. Monarchies are egg-laying mammals like the platypus and echidnas. Wagner speculated that these ancient monotremes eventually evolved into marine creatures such as whale and dolphins. Moreover, Wagner specifically proposed that pterosaurs were direct ancestors of dolphins, suggesting a close evolutionary relationship between these flying reptiles and marine mammals. This theory represented a significant attempt to understand the relationships between different ancient animals based on their anatomical features and habits. However, with advancements in paleontology and the discovery of new fossils, scientific understanding has evolved over time. Presently, the idea that pterosaurs were fully aquatic creatures like dolphins is not widely supported in the scientific community. Instead, modern research and findings suggest that pterosaurs were flying reptiles that soared through the skies rather than swimming through the water. Scrotum humanum. The first scientific description of a dinosaur fossil dates back to 1763, when Richard Brookes examined a Megalosaurus femur bone. Back then, without knowledge of dinosaurs, Brookes believed this bone belonged to a giant human. He correctly identified it as a femur, noting its resemblance to human testicles, and humorously labeled it as Scrotum humanum. The original name given by Brookes for Megalosaurus, and by extension, all dinosaurs, raised an interesting debate in scientific naming conventions. However, the International Commission for Zoological Nomenclature ruled against retaining the name Homo humano from the source. Some paleontologists like Bill Sargent and Gregory Halstead, along with historians of science like M.J. Woodward, amusingly agree that dinosaurs should have, by rights, retained the less dignified and comical original title given by Buddha. They see this as a departure from the norm in scientific nomenclature. Jackalope spider hoax. The jackalope spider was a clever hoax on the internet to create a conceiving but entirely fabricated story. In 2015, a Photoshop image started circulating online, depicting a creature that appeared to be a combination of a spider and a jackrabbit, dubbed the jackalope spider. The image showed a creature with the body of a spider, but with the head and ears of a jackrabbit, leading many to believe that such a bizarre creature existed. However, the image was digitally altered, merging different animal features to create an entirely fictional creature. While the jackalope itself is a mythical creature from American folklore, a cross between a jackrabbit and antelope, the idea of a jackalope spider was a completely invented concept, intended to amuse and deceive people online. The hoax quickly spread across social media and various websites, capturing the attention of many intrigued by its peculiar appearance. However, experts and fact-checkers soon debunked the image, clarifying that it was a digitally manipulated creation and not an actual living creature. Sumenia civilization. So Sumenia is a synapsid from the Permian period, approximately 260 million years ago. The thing that makes it weird is its well-preserved fossils reveal characteristics that were unusual for its time, notably adaptations for an arboreal or tree-dwelling lifestyle. This feature is particularly significant as most synapsids of the Permian era were adapted to life on ground. Also, a striking aspect of Sumenia is its hand structure. The fossils show hands capable of grasping and clicking, trace reminiscence of those seen in modern primates. These adaptations suggest a lifestyle that involved climbing and maneuvering through trees, a rarity among creatures of its time. The civilization part of this intrigue comes from speculative theories about Sumenia. Because they resembled primates that are really similar to the ones we evolved from, they became theories about a lost civilization of intelligent, humanoid Sumenia. The most I could really find in this theory was a Reddit post, and people in the comments suggest that, referring back to the Silurian hypothesis, the lost civilization might have left no trace for us to know if they really existed or not. Actuarial problem in paleontology. The actuarial problem of paleontology introduces a thought-provoking idea about how we understand fossils and evolution. It suggests that because there are so many different fossil species, and because scientists often use certain key fossils to figure out the age of other fossils, we might end up seeing patterns of evolution even if evolution didn't actually happen. The idea isn't saying evolution isn't real, instead it's questioning how we interpret fossil evidence. It argues that in science, especially in studying fossils, there's always a chance of making connections that might not actually be there, simply because of the huge number of fossils and the methods used to study them. This approach differs from traditional scientific methods, which usually focus on proving something wrong, a principle known as apparent falsifiability to test if it's true. Spinosaurus is accurate. Spinosaurus was actually initially designed as a parody, created by Adrian Wimmer. It depicts Spinosaurus, a well-known dinosaur, in an exaggerated, fully aquatic form resembling a seal with a proboscis. This creation was meant to humorously critique the sometimes over-enthusiastic nature of speculative paleo art, where artists and scientists imagine what prehistoric creatures might have looked like. What's really interesting though is the joke took a turn when recent studies, particularly those by Ibrahim and colleagues, began to suggest that Spinosaurus might have actually been more aquatic than previously believed. These new findings included evidence of a laterally compressed, newt-like tail and other streamlined features that supported the idea of a Spinosaurus being well adapted to water. This new scientific perspective of Spinosaurus unexpectedly made the concept of a Spinosaurus sort of believable. The exaggerated features of Spinosaurus, while still being far from being an accurate depiction of Spinosaurus, ironically aligned somewhat with these recent scientific revelations. This overlap has led to an interesting phenomenon where some have mistaken the artworks of Spinosaurus for serious reconstructions of the new aquatic-oriented Spinosaurus. Humanoid chirotherium. Initially unearthed in Triassic sandstone in Germany in 1934 and later in England, the chirotherium footprints bore an uncanny resemblance to human hands, complete with opposed thumbs. The debate over these mysterious prints was intense, with various theories proposed about their origin. Initially, some believed these prints belonged to a marsupial, bear, ape, or even an early human ancestor. The most weird theory out there suggests they were from an amphibious, frog-like ancestors of humans living in Triassic swamps. This idea captured the public imagination and influenced various works of fiction and conspiracy theories. It resonated in Karl Kapek's War with the Newts, the Gill Man from the Black Lagoon films, and even modern conspiracy theories about reptilians. The mystery began to clear in 1842 when Richard Owen identified the prints as belonging to a giant amphibian, Labyrinthodon. Labyrinthodon itself was a puzzling creature, with tracks suggesting an awkward, cross-legged guy as depicted in Charles Lyell's reconstruction. Eventually though, by the late 1800s, the consensus shifted to tracks being made by the pseudo-Suchian called chirotherium, resembling a bipedal caiman using its thumbs for traction on mudflats. Fossils Visplastica. During the medieval and early modern periods, the popular theory about the formation of fossils was centered on the concept of Visplastica. This notion suggested that fossils would form by mysterious shaping force within the earth. The idea was in line with the religious and philosophical views of the time, which were hesitant to accept that fossils could be remains of extinct organisms, as it would imply imperfection in God's creations. Theologians argued that a perfect God would not create species destined to go extinct, so fossils were explained as a result of Visplastica rather than being remains of once living organisms. Supporters of Visplastica believed that the sequence of fossil formation was from rock to mineralized fossil to unmineralized fossil. They contended that it was unlikely for a process in the rock to produce forms similar to living organisms, like sharks' teeth or sea urchins, without divine or mystical intervention. Siberian Ceratosaurus. The Siberian Ceratosaurus is a story that came from Soviet newspapers in the early 20th century. In these reports, living packs of Ceratosaurus, which are likely a mistaken reference to Ceratosaurus, a genus of carnivorous dinosaurs, were discovered in Kamchatka, leaving distinct tracks. The story was added with details such as the foot of a recently killed Ceratosaurus, allegedly large enough to enclose a man's head, and supposedly captured in a photograph that, however, never made it into English language newspapers. The New York Herald's coverage on the story on December 17, 1922 reflects the context of its time. The newspaper expressed concern over the potential use of these supposed live dinosaurs as biological weapons by the Soviet Union. This would actually be really scary. Imagine dinosaurs as weapons. This fear mirrored the broader anxieties of the Cold War period though, where advancements in science and technology by one superpower often sparked paranoia and speculation on the other. This narrative of living dinosaurs in Siberia, while intriguing, doesn't really have any scientific credibility. Period of Far Eastern mini creatures. Konosuke Okamura, a Japanese amateur paleontologist, proposed a unique, eccentric theory in paleontology. In the 1970s, he claimed to have discovered fossils from the Silurian geological period that include miniature animals ranging from dinosaurs to humans. He reported more than 1,000 extinct mini-species, each less than 0.25 millimeters in length, and contended that there have been no significant changes in the bodies of humankind since the Silurian period, except for an increase in size from 2.5 millimeters to 1,700 millimeters. Okamura's findings and theories, however, were not accepted by the mainstream scientific community. His presentations at Japan's paleontology conferences in the 1970s were met with skepticism, and his approach sparked controversy. It was even rumored that an elderly paleontologist became so angered by Okamura's lecture in 1978 that he suffered from high blood pressure and died prematurely. Following these incidents, the paleontology conference changed its rules to ban amateurs, and Okamura turned to overseas colleges and self-publishing for his research. In 1996, Okamura was actually awarded the Ig Nobel Prize, a satirical prize that honors unusual or trivial achievements in scientific research. Birds Came First theory. The Birds Came First theory is a complete reimagining of dinosaur evolution, challenging traditional views on the relationship between birds and dinosaurs. This theory has been most notably advocated by George Oldhevsky, who proposed that all dinosaurs descended from a bird-like ancestor capable of flight. According to his theory, the common ancestor of dinosaurs were not a traditional, large reptile-like creature, but rather a smaller, flight-capable bird. Over time, following Cope's law, which suggested tendencies for species to grow larger over evolutionary time, these bird-like ancestors evolved into various forms of large, flightless dinosaurs. This perspective turns the conventional understanding of dinosaur evolution on its head, suggesting that features like feathers and other bird-like characteristics were not just present in a few dinosaur species, but were fundamental to all dinosaurs. Gregory Paul, another proponent of a bird-centric view of dinosaur evolution, identified Archaeopteryx, a well-known transitional fossil, as a key link between Triassic birds and later dinosaurs like Deinonychus. This interpretation positions Archaeopteryx not just as a traditional form between dinosaurs and birds, but as an intermediate stage in the evolution of certain dinosaur species from bird-like ancestors. Goes Ahead Meganeura. This entry is about the story of Goes Ahead, a crow medicine man and his encounter with a dragonfly-like creature in 1870. During his vision quest in the Wolf Mountain, Goes Ahead reportedly encountered a large, serpent-like creature with 4 wings. He was being transformed into a bird-sized dragonfly and died at his feet. He then preserved the creature's body, adorning it with jewels, and carried it in a satchel everywhere he went, including to the infamous Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. In 1900, however, upon his baptism, he felt compelled to discard the mummified creature. No carving he made of it survived. This carving represents a tangible link to the mysterious creature from his vision quest. Historians like Adrian Mayer and John LeMay have explored the intriguing possibility that the creature Goes Ahead encountered could have been a Meganeura or a similar giant griffinfly. Meganeura were prehistoric insects from the late Carboniferous period, resembling giant dragonflies with wingspans reaching up to several feet. I would personally be terrified ever seeing something like that. The idea that a meganeura long extinct could have appeared in the 9th century is ultimately a source of fascination and speculation. Dinosaur bones on the moon. The dinosaur bones on the moon theory is an urban legend of dinosaur bones found on the moon. This legend has taken various forms, with some variants suggesting the discovery of alien or giant humanoid bones by a NASA mission, and others claiming the bones were clad in denim. The most interesting version involves dinosaur bones, often referred to as lunar Critosaurus. This particular version of the legend was given a semblance of credibility by the independent Orion Observatory of Santa Monica. In Patrick Moore's book, Can You Speak Venusian?, it's mentioned that the observatory published a paper interpreting photographs taken by the Surveyor lunar probe as showing the remains of dinosaurs on the moon. While this claim is not supported by mainstream science, its contribution to the legend is persistent. The idea that dinosaur bones could be on the moon is not entirely without scientific foundation, though it remains highly speculative. Hank Green and other scientists have discussed the possibility that the asteroid impact that caused the KT extinction event might have ejected debris, including dinosaur remains, into space. The moon, with its minimal atmosphere and geological activity, could theoretically preserve such remains. Initial bipedalism. Initial bipedalism is an unconventional theory in the field of evolutionary biology. It posits that all vertebrates are descended from a bipedal, human-like ancestor, a concept that contradicts the well-established scientific understanding of vertebrate evolution. According to his theory, the original ancestor of all vertebrates was a marine homunculus, a creature that evolved directly from marine worms. This organism supposedly adopted a bipedal posture by floating upright in the water, with a buoyant dome at the head end, keeping it afloat and body dangling beneath. Over time, this head bubble is said to have evolved into a skull, with the development of small, feel-like arms and legs. The premise of this theory suggests that these early humanoids eventually moved onto land, and from these proto-humans, all other vertebrates are believed to have descended, or, as the theory suggested, devolved. The theory implies that the transition to a four-legged posture in later vertebrates led to a loss of intellectual capacity inherent in the bipedal ancestors. Fossils are from the future. The idea that fossils might originate from the future is a concept explored in paranormal and conspiracy literature, presenting two intriguing theories.